The one, the only.
Sure. I hate being out of sync with you. There we go. How are you?
One, the only Kurt Doolittle.
You handsome devil.
Wonderful to see you as always.
I like you in that dark blue. Well, I compliment you on your clothing quite often.
You're very kind. I must say I appreciate it. Thank
That
you.
tie, though, it's not enough dominance expression for the blue.
Oh, I see. It's
You
okay.
should be. You want to have a little more red there so you can dominate the room. I'm not sure that's really
No,
what
I don't need it.
I was like, he's gonna go somewhere with this.
Somewhere this is gonna go sideways.
This is going somewhere.
Kurt, I want to say this. It's interesting. I'm observing your behaviors. I'm trying to throw this piece of paper away. I'm observing your behaviors with relation to in the study of sciences in a wide-ranging pattern. It's all over the place wherever humans study science. You're just all over it, and it's kind of interesting.
I'm not sure I know what you're saying.
I'm like watching you're interacting with all the different people on different scientific subject matter of great variety.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, I recognize what you're doing. And it's like, I did not appreciate it as much as I do after today. Cause I'm like, just watching interactions and I'm like, okay, I get it. So there's no limit to scientific inquiry here.
Like, I mean, when we tell people, I tell people, we solved the scientific method. We found the first principle.
Right.
Once you know that, it's everywhere.
Right.
Right now, the disturbing thing is disturbing. I just find some of this stuff odd, right? I mean, because you grow up and you think all these things are unrelated. It turns out the architecture underneath them is quite simple, right? I mean, and once you realize language is just another set of measurements by which we use this body to measure the world, right? And we turn those measurements into language, and language follows the same principles the rest of the universe, which is continuous recursive disambiguation into an unambiguous contract for meaning. Well, I mean, what the fuck does the universe do? Right? It's the same goddamn thing. Once you realize that you and I talking, cooperating, finding a contract for meaning is what sex does, or what what organelles and organs do, it's the same process. So it's the same process that waves participate in order to create a protoparticle and a particle. I mean,
that's right.
It's the same process that electromagnetism uses to bind different atoms into molecules, and molecules into chains, and chains into proteins, and proteins into machines, and machines into transformation of energy, and energy into life, and life into I mean, it's the same fucking process. The problem is, I actually know every field.
I mean, problem.
Well, I mean, it's hard to do that.
Yes.
Right. And people think when you need to learn a field, you need to learn how it's like the difference between applying and understanding.
That's right.
I keep saying that I can't do chemistry. I wouldn't want to be a chemist, but I understand chemistry.
Right.
I just don't like it. It's gross. It's like biology. It's about getting your fingers dirty, and I don't want to get my hands dirty. I'm autistic. That's not a good thing.
That's not how you guys
autistics don't do finger paints. We can't stand it. All right. My mother was horrified by that, by the way, when I was in nursery school. I'm not doing finger paints.
I'm not touching that.
I'm not touching that. My mother, I swear to God, I heard it right up until the month before she died. It so disturbed her.
Another confession from Kurt Doolittle. I must say something else.
And it's like, you don't realize, because when you're autistic, all the sense gets through. Like, you can't filter it. So the thing that used to bother me is my father would edge the lawn, right? Edge the sun, because we own a lawn and garden center. When you do that, your house has to be pretty.
Oh, I get you.
All right. So he's like, you don't understand. My house is part of my advertising, right? I can't.
That's right. That's right.
So, he would edge the thing, and he made me pull the dirt up.
Oh,
but you understand how, like the grass trimming, right?
Yeah.
But to an autistic, that's like getting shocked by lightning. right? It's a horrible experience.
Disturbing.
You know what? I really didn't get control of that until I was about 12, right? I mean, you know,
Your dad was traumatizing you.
and he was so pissed at me all the time, and I'm like, I have, you know, we didn't know what autism was, Asperger's was back then, right? Right, and some people like me, we learn to master it. I mean, mostly, and some people never can, right? But I mean, mostly you can get a hold of it. So, you know, things like, and the one thing that the other thing that really bothered him is I wouldn't touch the live bait when we would go fishing, and it would make him spitting mad.
Right. It's like, what? Son, you're getting on my nerves.
I mean, spitting mad. Oh, I remember this time we were deep sea fishing in Florida. He actually took us home because I just couldn't stand the feel of the bait. Right. And he thinks I'm like, it's not that I'm a pussy. I literally can't stand it. Right. I mean, you know, there's like, so, you know, you might feel a burning sensation, right? If you wouldn't stand that, but that feeling is the same. It's the same intensity for an autist. Anyway, so what are we getting back? Oh, so the problem is knowing, you've got to know all these disciplines. Like once you get the grammars, then you see every discipline is just a different system of measurement, right? And that the bonds are slightly different. But I mean, the chemical bond is the atomic bond, the chemical bond, the polarity bond. I mean, it's just the fucking same across the whole universe. So once you sort of get that, then you go into the hard one for me. The hard one for most people is economics. Because until you get to economics, you don't account for the unseen.
Okay.
Right. And so the minute you get into economics, you say, here's a weight. What's causing the counterweight? It's hydraulic, because economics is hydraulic, right? It's very similar to universe. Now, most of what we do, if we boil the water, it goes into steam. But we don't have to do a full accounting because the steam, the capacity of the air to absorb steam. So all of us think like that. We think without this concept of full accounting. But once you get into economics, you start saying, holy shit, there's a lot going on out there. You know, it's like you hit the billiard ball, it's contained by the table. But that's not what happens to human behavior.
That's right.
You know, it goes out there and God knows what the hell. And, you know, you might push on this rock, right? Or this cart, and that may not make a big difference. But your words, they're like photons, right? The photons don't require anything to carry them. They just ride through the goddamn background. Well, your information, the words are like that. And so you don't really realize, or even your actions that people observe. Right. This stuff moves. And so, you know, you start saying, okay, what are we not accounting for here? You know, and then once you get to there and you start getting in the habit of full accounting, you start looking at the world as, okay, what's absorbing the externalities here?
Where does it go? What does it do?
And then what you do is you switch from thinking about this to thinking entirely about externalities. Well, so what do? I think entirely of falsifications. It's the same thing, right? It's just like, how does this fail? Where does this go? And you flip it around. So that's what's the hard part, right? Is actually economics. And once you get to there, you're like, okay, well, that's the same thing as happens in math when I'm calculating and I think I'm doing a proof. What I'm really doing is finding a path.
Yes.
Right. I'm right. And if I fail, I falsified my error, but I found a path. But that's different from saying a proof isn't necessary. It's just possible. And all of a sudden you go through this. But anyway, I had to learn every field. And, you know, there's some fields I'm just not interested in, like parasols. Or girly.
That threw me a little bit. I'm like,
well, I tried to come up with something ridiculous.
It worked. It totally worked. Wait, what?
Yeah. But once you understand that the rules are the same, at every scale, and then you have to switch from what we think of as justificationary logic of what's observable to falsificationary logic of what's not, and from proof to what's testifiable. In other words, from truth to testimony, what's testifiable. You don't have to know whether the person's statement is true. You have to know whether it's testifiable. If it's testifiable, then, well, it at least could be true.
Right. Then it's subject to falsification.
Yes.
It's not necessary to falsify it if it's not testifiable.
Correct. If it's not testifiable, you falsified by even claiming it.
That's right.
Right. I mean, now it doesn't necessarily mean like you could come up with a set of random letters that happen to describe some physical law somewhere. All right. But it's not, that's just coincidence. Right. So.
Well, allow me to introduce this episode, if I may.
I'm sorry. I didn't, I wanted to not go on that long about that subject.
It's okay. You did a fine job. This is episode 2024. Welcome, and hit like and subscribe and do all those things. Leave the comments. I haven't looked for the comments since the last 2 days, and I will look for the comments. I want to see some comments. Kurt loves the comments. I adore them.
Comments are getting better.
What's that?
Comments are getting better. Still not that many, but I mean, you've got to really know what you're talking about to comment on what we say. So
fair enough.
It's quite a challenge for people to get to the point to whether they can comment.
Don't be shy. You don't feel obligated, okay?
I'm proud of people when they ask questions. I mean, I'm proud of people.
Now, Kurt, have you got an agenda here?
Well, I want to run with, I want to riff off what you just said about multidisciplinary.
Yes.
And I want to take it to something I was talking about this morning. And I, there are a few people. Economics Explained is one. The Caspian Report is one. I can't remember that guy's name. The ones that does the genetic maps is one. Starts with an M.
That's not helpful.
Mattheus or something like that. And then everybody's favorite that's become really popular is What If Alt Hist.
Yep.
And I mean, you really can get a better education on YouTube than you can in university. It's getting really disturbing to me. Now, so what's really interesting is I'm reading a book right now that Peter Zeihan's the other, right? So what's disturbing me is all these people are outside the academy.
All of them.
Right. And it's amazing how much better the quality of, it's one thing to say their presentation quality is better because the academy's trapped in a sort of habit, right? You can forgive that, but the thought is better. And I was thinking, I really would like to just interview these guys so I could popularize what they're doing. Because if I just talk about it, it's not the same as having them talk about it. But if you go to these guys, you know, it's like the book I was reading this morning. What's it called? Hold on, I want to pull it up here. It's Geopolitical Alpha, which is a really bad name. But it's a guy who's saying, it's very much I guess it's one of the models that Zeihan uses.
Okay.
Or others are claiming it's similar to the model Zeihan uses. And so what's interesting about that piece, this book, is that first of all, he writes well. But in other words, he writes clearly about a complex subject, which is,
that's useful.
Going to say that's well. And so he's doing this great little book, and I think he's a Serb, might be a Serb. In other words, it's not English isn't his first language either. I mean,
what's the name?
Geopolitical Alpha, which is a horrible name for this book. Geopolitical Alpha, $18 on Kindle.
Okay.
And his initials are MP. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. And so what he's done is he said, which is very akin to what I've been saying, which is he's telling you to think about incentives of politicians without anything to do with politics, which is just look at
Very interesting.
their incentives, and their incentives are their constraints, and their constraints are usually economic and strategic, right? And instead, and ignore everything the population says, and ignore everything on the news, right? Which is how I look at it too. I'm like, until I see data, until I see data and I can make a model of incentives, I don't care, right? Because it doesn't mean anything. All that tells me is all popular nonsense tells me is what popular people are thinking. And there's usually a fairly horrifying divergence about what people are thinking and talking about
and what's really happening
and what's really going on, because they think their feelings are the same thing as the incentives that are available to politicians and military, and it's not. I mean, you're limited by your constraints. In other words, by the via negativa.
That's right.
Right. And so I just love that that this I can recommend this book, and I can frame it as showing the gradual change as we move from justification to via negativa falsification, and from incentives to do to incentives that limit choices. All right. So I always say you need to know you need to do a full accounting within the limits, and that's what provides you with the incentives. So again, we're back to what we think of as economic accounting, but when we say economics, we're really talking about the difference between the seen and unseen, which we reduce to this concept called opportunity costs.
Right.
Opportunity cost being formally the difference between one set of choices and another. But you can't, when what we don't do with justificationary system is we just think about this thing in isolation. Like we think about, what does this cost me in isolation? The way we think about boiling water and the steam going away.
Right.
We don't account for the steam. Well, I mean, the problem is in economics at any scale, the steam has to go somewhere.
And it makes a difference.
Right. And what I like about the quantum background, talking about the quantum background, is stuff got nowhere to go, which is why there's a universe. I mean, if there were things had somewhere to go, the universe would dissipate. The fact that the universe is having so much trouble dissipating is why there's stuff in it. Because if there wasn't,
it's like, there's no place to put it.
The universe is fully accounting. It has to.
There's no rug.
Right. Because otherwise, electrons and protons, these would collapse.
They would sink beneath the waves.
Right. They wouldn't be able to stay. But the problem is that there's nowhere for stuff to go. So we think of it as, we put, steam is what? 1 cubic meter of water turns into is it 17,000 cubic of gas? I mean, cubic meters of gas. It's like, I want to say
what atmospheric pressure, of course, right?
Right, but I mean it's big, right? That's why steam is so dangerous.
Yes.
That's why steam pipe building is you get paid money for steam pipes, and insurance companies get paid money for it, because blowing up a steam pipe is really easy.
Yeah, it is. 1,700 times.
1,700, not 17,000. Okay.
That was very good.
Well, I mean, it's like you brought up. Well, if you have to every field,
it's a lot of.
It's just too much stuff. I can't always quite get there. But think about it, I can get there sometimes. But I'm talking to you, and got 3 other things in my head, and sometimes it comes.
It's a working memory problem. It's like I get it. I totally get it.
It's like Sabine Hassenfelder yesterday. I couldn't remember her name, which drives me nuts, right? Why can't I mean? It's not like I don't
You
keep
can.
it right. I just can't. I couldn't get there. Anyway, so this was great. Now there's this
Glad you
guy.
closed that circuit for me, by the way. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
So then we have like this guy What Up Alted, which is really, I mean, he's just built himself a whole industry, and the fucking guy's a kid,
Yeah.
right? He's like, and I think I can't even remember if he finished school or not. I don't think so. He doesn't need to. Or it's pointless. It's like, you know, Gates.
What's the value to be added, right?
There isn't any. I mean, he's literally phenomenal. Now, so the question is, what is he doing? Well, what he did was he did simulations. So he didn't try to memorize history. He wrote alternate histories.
Right.
Well, what does that do? It runs adversarial simulations. And what did he learn? It's economics.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting.
It's the idea of running a game. A game is an adversarial simulation, which falsifies, right? Which you're constantly trying to make something survive. And so it's the same, and so that's different from a justification. If you look at history and try to explain it, you'll come up with all sorts of stupid shit. But if you try to permute it, right, you'll see where it fails, right? Now you can. The thing is, you have to have multidisciplinary knowledge to do it. Does that make sense?
So if what we're doing then, what it appears to be occurring is the general shift in human consciousness from the paradigm of justificationary logics to falsificationary logics.
Correct.
And so it's like, it's an inevitability then, it would seem, because it's technically superior mechanism for understanding how the world is operating.
Correct. And so when I say what went wrong in 1830, that's what went wrong.
Well, they failed to upgrade their software.
Exactly. I mean, basically, we didn't produce a philosopher, right? We didn't produce, Babbage had the information. He didn't systematize it into thought. We took us to the late 1800s to get the marginalists, right? But even then, people were resistant to believing that they couldn't manipulate the economy, so they kept this stuff going through Marx and Keynes and the neoliberals all through the 20th century.
Well, yeah, that's because it goes to this. I have to keep referencing the conversation between Glenn Beck and the socialist, who Glenn Beck framed the question like this: if I could prove to you, as a matter of fact, that socialism can never work, what would you say to that? The socialist says, well, we have to try. And that's what it appears is going on. It's just, it hasn't been done right yet. Doesn't mean it can't be done right. We have to. They're tasked to give it a go.
Well, we know it can't work, so it doesn't, we can't.
Wait, but they don't have to agree.
We don't have to agree with them either.
That's correct.
What happens when we can't agree?
We
separate or we fight. I prefer to separate. It's cheaper. They're going to fail anyway. But why do they have to?
They don't have to fail with me included.
Yeah. All right. So you brought up the point is that a lot of things went wrong in the 1800s that were masked by the extraordinary wealth produced by the Industrial Revolution.
It is the Industrial Revolution. It's stemming from 1776 with the invention of the first commercial steam engine, right? Which is quite an amazing year, to be honest. And it's like, it is the caloric input from geologic sources, as opposed to solar sources or
animal sources.
Yeah, animals, but it's the same thing, and it's like, but it stems, it's just the amount of energy being applied by human beings is just off the charts compared to what had ever occurred before in history. And it goes to your thesis of the inclusion of more calories into the social structure that.
Yep, it's all it is. It's disturbing. What's disturbing is the volume of bullshit we go through because we don't know this stuff.
But please be more specific than using these Hebraic terms with me.
Think of all the words.
That was worth money to me right there.
That was, I know. I'm like, he really enjoyed that too much.
Here's Kurt.
Okay.
Okay. What do you mean by that, Kurt?
Think of all the ink that's been spilled.
Yes.
And the words that have been uttered. Trying to, because we just don't know any better. Or it was just because we've tried to play this game for thousands of years, right? And it turns out that the world is pretty simple.
It's more simple than that, right? It's way simple. It's like, I talked to my sister.
Sorry, can I complete
Absolutely.
it? Is that the reason is this will, if this doesn't make you go, oh fuck, right? It's okay. So what is our most advanced technology? Lying, cheating, and scheming, right? All right. So
like what did we got? Who's got the most incentive to develop their technology? It's like that guy who's gonna rook somebody on something.
And so the problem is, because we anthropomorphize everything, because it's the only system of measure we have, we assume the world is as complex as the lying, cheating, and scheming and bullshitting that's going on. It's really not. Isn't that horrible? That's like so depressing.
No, what I would say is depressing is the amount of work it takes to convince someone that no, it's actually quite simple. And it's like, no, I want to believe the bullshit. It's so complex and beautiful. And it's like, I talked to my sister. She's a coach, like a personal coach kind of person. And it's like this. I just talk about these people, and I'm like, so many words, just so many words. Just can't get to the point because they're just making clouds. Which is like, there's a reason they're making clouds, because they're hiding something behind the clouds. But they don't even, it's not necessary for them to even know what they're doing. They are benefiting from making clouds, and they don't have to know that that is what they're up to. And they think that they're clarifying.
They're seeking a stable equilibrium.
Well, it's stable for them, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're seeking their own stable equilibrium.
And they're stabilizing themselves at the top of the pile. Without being
they don't realize that the only stable equilibrium is forward progress. In other words, there's no way you can't, the red queen doesn't stop. So if you're seeking a stable equilibrium, you're just letting the red queen get ahead so you fall behind. And that's one of our instincts that's just wrong, right? I mean, we try to take joy in evading adaptation rather than always supporting each other which is Greek, right? This is Greek. Always supporting each other for our embracing of self-improvement as a new means of adaptation. And so we've created, and I know why this is. It's because it's part of the demonstration of wealth made possible by the Industrial Revolution is sort of a Veblenian criticism, is that we're trying to show that we're well off by showing we can relax. When
it's like a virtue signal,
right? So the theory of the leisure class. It's called the theory of the leisure class.
Okay.
Look that up if you don't know what it is.
I'm writing it down.
So what's happened is the Greeks wouldn't have done that. And if you look at what rich people do, all right, or what successful people, that's not how they view relaxing. Relaxing is doing. Right. And so they're like, they're fit, they go to the gym, right? And so they find a way of relaxing while improving. Right. And so you see this, my ex-wife being an amazing example of it. Get up in the morning, go for a goddamn run, make a list of shit she's going to do today, plow through the goddamn list of it, come home, do the shit around. I mean, she used to make me tired. She made me tired just thinking about what she was thinking about, you know, and I'm in the opposite mode. I got to work on shit that takes years to bring to fruition. Right. And so I'm just like slow calculating everything, and then I just handle problems that come up as they emerge. It's the was a beautiful relationship, really, this sort of pairing. Anyway, so what were we on before I got distracted there?
Adversarial competition, falsification. We're going from justification to falsification on a general scale here. It's inevitability of
right, which is just scale, right? It's just a problem of scale. You know, nobody looks at Einstein and said, well, and says, well, he actually proved there aren't any lines.
He did prove there's no lines.
There's no lines.
Like, there's no parallel. Sorry. Like
that's so disturbing. But
it is.
Before you get there, you think in lines.
Yeah, there's lines.
And
you like think there's really lines.
Do you think there's really lines? No, there aren't any.
They're like lines.
Well, a line,
curvy.
A line is a human scale phenomenon, right? A line's a human scale concept.
That's right. It doesn't exist at scale.
Doesn't exist outside human scale.
And it only exists as an imaginary function.
Correct.
At the local scale. It's
right.
Because it's too insensibly curved.
Correct. And which is fucking hysterical, right? I mean,
just the human condition is.
So this is the beautiful part about about this work, right? Is that at some point you can get frustrated with people as they are, but at some point you come to the conclusion that it's a miracle we fucking did anything, right? You know, I mean,
it is. It's like what the interesting function of it is this: if you project, you become frustrated with other people.
Yes. Because
really, the shortcomings that you see in them are just part of your problem, and it's just they're just like they are. The lines are curves, right? And that's the way it is, and that's the way it's going to be. And it's get over it and move on and be productive with what you have. Yep. And take agency here for those shortcomings that you see in the population. That's how it is, because they're not going to change to suit you. Okay, Marcus Aurelius. Yes, sir. I do appreciate it. It's very retro, like it's introspective, right? Incredibly difficult to learn mindfulness. If we invested in physical fitness and stoic mindfulness as heavily as we invested in like math, reading, etc., and if we threw out all the other political bullshit that's contrary to it, people would be able to be happy relatively easily. So funny. What was that face for? I didn't understand. That was for your use of the Hebraic. The bullshit. Oh, okay. It's like a placeholder for a lot of things, right? And I could have said stuff, but it doesn't. It's not critical enough. But see, bullshit is the Hebraic is perfectly descriptive and understandable to everybody. Yes. Which is why I studied the Hebrew, man, because I'm like, it covers it. It's like very amazing. Well, it's like, that's a really good example. It's a very old Semitic language, right? And it's because it's been written so long, it tends to survive, right? Is that how it is? Yeah. And so what's interesting is if you learn Russian, Russian's a very farm language. Yes. Right. And so everything there's the implication that we're drunk farmers. That's because right? In a frustrating, corrupt world where everyone's a potential enemy. That's the metaphysics on Russian language. And it's just fucking and their humor. I mean, the great thing about the Russian language is it's not like
because English has become a very parsimonious language with a lot of words. In other words, but word constructs aren't hard, right? So you have different spellings that tell you whether it's a French or a German or a Roman or a Greek term, right? But my ex-wife is sending me sarcastic remarks here while I'm talking to you, and it's popping, and I don't know how to close the message. So every time she's busting my balls while I'm talking to you, and it's really distracting. Anyway, I love her. Anyway,
Increasing your difficulty level.
So the great thing about Russian language is it's sort of like how everything sound, you can make things sound the same in Chinese, right? But Russian is like, you can say innuendo is like way too soft. You can suggest a lot of stuff with Russian humor. And so it's quite witty, really, right? It's quite witty how they play with that language, because things don't have to be in the same order. So because you can move around the order of things with different endings, it's possible to have multiple interpretations. So of given, so it's just a very cunning way, but it's still like French is a political language. And English is a legal language. Frankly, German's a military language. And it's just funny that Russian is the language of ordinary farmer peasants, complaining about the fact that the men are always drunk. And so the way English people would make fun of each other for being stupid, right? We tease each other, right? They do it. The implication is the reason you're stupid is because you're drunk. Right, right. It's just a different way, and then there's like, the world's a shit. We will and the government is corrupt, and we're surrounded by enemies, but we'll get through it. It's just fucking hysterical.
It's a bad start, isn't it? It's like, that's kind of a rough situation, isn't it?
You know, I just find it really humorous. Anyway,
it is.
Culture's
Human condition is like that, I think. Tragic, humorous, and tragic at the same time.
I don't know, man. English is as an island language, which is really fascinating to me. And anyway, I didn't mean to go off on this. I find English is very interesting, because it's like a thug for vocabulary. Like, it will rob a word from anywhere it can find it. And so you have the German working class language, the French political language, right? You have the Latin church language, and you have the Greek intellectual language, and you have this more of empirical language. And so you have this, and so people are telling you all the time where they are by what words they use. And then you have class pronunciation, right? And this classes, I mean, I'm aware of it, but I mean, Americans are aware of class too. We just accept it. In other words, it's not like the British where there's this hard line.
Yes.
Our society's commercial. And so you treat everybody as a customer, despite we're from different classes, which I find really interesting. And the French are fucking rude to you no matter what. Italians are the most fun people, in my opinion. They're the most fun people because they're actually as bravado as Americans. They're willing to do crazy shit and go out and enjoy life. But they don't take things too seriously. It's really quite fun. Except in Germany at what's the beer thing? Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
Italians are a very dangerous group of men because they just get completely out of hand. Not with violence, just with trash talking. And it doesn't work in Germany very good when you trash talk. It's not that kind of place.
They don't.
So these big German men come out of nowhere and they pick up these guys and they pull the beer steins away from them and then they cart them all away. I mean, it's amazing how good they are at it. Germans, of course, are going to be good at everything. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go. How did I fucking get over here on this rant?
You were talking about mindfulness.
Anyway, need to teach mindfulness, right? Which is what you have. Of course, you look at everybody else as they're stupid because they don't do what you do. But it's actually quite hard to have
Not
mindfulness.
really. It's like, I try to help them out. Try to help them out a little bit because I recognize how difficult all is. It's like we're all hobbled in so many ways, and it's just very irritating to get out of our little ruts and move on to the high road, right?
Right.
That's all.
So Stoicism is a very middle class and upper middle class value, right? But the problem is it varies from Arianism. In that, what are you responsible for in Islam? What are you responsible for in Buddhism? What are you responsible for in Stoicism? And what are you responsible for in Arianism?
Right.
I mean Arianism in the Western tradition, not in the.
I understand. It's like there's a conflation there, which is unavoidable. You know what I mean?
I'll use aristocratic egalitarianism. So just use aristocracy
So
instead of
there's a
Arianism.
spelling issue. There's a spelling issue here. Is it Arianism?
Well, that's a religion.
Aryanism.
And that's the Indo-Europeans.
I see. Yeah.
Aryan, ARY, Indo-Europeans,
Yes.
aristocracy.
Yes.
And the difference is, what are you responsible for? Now, this is my problem with Buddhism versus Stoicism.
Yes.
Buddhism says, fuck it. Stoicism says, I'm going to still try to get my shit done.
Despite the hardships that are
Right. Well, and it's really the difference. Both of them say what other people think of you doesn't matter. Right? Christianity does it a different way. Christianity says, I'm going to love you no matter what you think. But it's the same thing. It doesn't matter what you think. Right? That's what
it's an inverted version of it. Yeah.
Right. But that's what mindfulness is. I don't give a fuck what you think about me. Right? The difference in the techniques of mindfulness is, what am I responsible for?
Okay. Right.
And so you can look at very clearly what Islam says I'm responsible for.
Right.
Right. And you can see Christianity, what I'm responsible for. In Judaism, what I'm responsible for. In Hinduism, what I'm responsible for. In Buddhism, what I'm responsible for. Now, all of a sudden, you get to Stoicism, what am I responsible for? Then you get to Confucianism, what am I responsible for? And then you get to, well, I would call it Arianism, but aristocratic egalitarianism. What am I responsible for? And so the difference is which responsibility is conveyed by which technique of producing mindfulness. Now, the methods across this are basically variations on rituals.
Right.
Right. And so you might tell prayer as a ritual, which Islam takes to the extreme, right? It takes to the extreme and it makes you go with other men in a group and often, right? You get all these rituals to get mindfulness from because they restore you to a mindful state the more you do them, right? Christianity does through prayer and church and social groups. Judaism does it through separatism and all these rituals and religions they have. Buddhism does it through the ritual of the self, plus some external stuff. And Buddhism is where you start to get, as you differentiate between the old world, the Semitic world of tribes, and you begin to get into polities. I missed over Hinduism, didn't I? Hinduism says I'm responsible for myself within my caste, but that's all. Buddhism doesn't say that. It says I'm responsible for myself, independent of all the other people, but it's universal. Right?
That's right. It's like a universal separatist.
Right. But that's interesting. But Chinese is like, I'm responsible for my position in the family tree that goes from the emperor on down. Right. I mean, I'm responsible for my family. Right. And they're really good at that shit. I mean, you don't want to underestimate. They're not good at commons, But at the family level, they've got the family thing down. But they're not responsible for commons or polities. When we get to Stoicism, I'm responsible for me, but I'm also responsible for continuous self-improvement and improvement of the world around me. In other words, I've got to externalize my virtues. This is aristocracy light, right? Then you get to aristocratic egalitarianism. And it's like, I'm fucking responsible. I'm responsible. Period. And a fucking story. I'm responsible for everything and everybody.
Right.
This is why Europeanism is so hard. This is why an aristocracy of everybody is hard. Because you're telling all these people they can be aristocrats, but they actually can't. When they used to be Christians and the aristocracy, which is a nice overlap, right? Because, you know, I mean, despite the fact that a lot of the aristocracy was fucking gangster assholes during most of the Middle Ages, but, you know, we'll forgive that. The basic point is that you're responsible. And so, and this comes with the Greeks, right? I mean, a citizen is responsible. There's no limit to your responsibility. You're responsible for the fact that that guy dropped a cigarette butt on the floor in the Commons, right? You're responsible. And so the problem is Europeans, we're responsible for fucking everything. But we aren't that's okay if you're you or me. Because frankly, we can do anything we want, right? If you wanted to be top in a field, you would just need to work hard, right? If I want to be top in field, I just put my interest there, right? Right? You're not going to be stopped by anything, right? I mean, it's just, you have the ability to manifest what you want, all right? And so the problem is that Stoicism is good for people who can manifest with the resources available to them.
Right.
Buddhism is good for people who have no resources, but they can manifest for their behavior. Then you get down into Christianity and Judaism, certainly Christianity and Islam, is you only have to manifest yourself, right? And so all these things are just basic. How do I produce mindfulness, and what's the responsibility I have? Right. So the problem is we're sticking people in a position of being responsible without the method of mindfulness necessary to make it happen. We needed to go from Christianity to secular humanism and Stoic training, or some variation of it, and we didn't. And the reason is, it's really easy to teach Christianity, but you got to work at teaching Stoicism. Stoicism would have to be taught like Buddhism is taught, as a discipline.
Yeah, it's a discipline, and the issue is the question is the evolution of individual agency, because stagnation is cheap.
Yes.
And it's like the costs of stagnation is not recognizable to someone who's ignorant of economics.
Okay, well, there's a jump in scale there that I wasn't tracking.
It's like this: is an individual who is ignorant of economics cannot calculate the cost of stagnation.
Yes. Okay, so what you're saying is there's 3 dimensions. There's fitness, self-regulation, understanding, and then the last one, of course, is competency. So we're not teaching fitness, self-regulation, or understanding. We're trying to jump people to competency, and it's not working because they don't have the foundation for understanding or self-regulation or physical fitness.
It's like really the premise that we're teaching them for competency, I would say this is
it's false.
It's not really, we're not solving for competency. The system is solving for political
Infantilization. solving for infantilization so that a mother state can develop and order people around, and so that people along the spectrum can feel comfortable rather than adapt. Is that close enough? I'm trying to,
Yeah,
I'm watching your eyes because I know I'm only in the right direction. I'm not quite right.
You've now stumbled upon it, Kurt, which is it's reversion to the goddess state and the submersion of in chronos, stuck in time, in the well sitting of the moment.
Yeah, so here's how I approach it. Here's my understanding is that why I just like working with Christians. You know why? They presume the positive.
Right.
And so one of the, you can't ask the big questions, but we're the workplace, fucking awesome. Presume the positives, right? And so the problem here is that the reason people don't want to adapt, the reason the empathic people don't want to adapt is the resistance to the conflict generated by change. Right, cooperation, the sacrifice required for cooperation, and the right, and the change. So what they see whenever they have to work with people is a fear of coercion and being coerced, because either they're just afraid of that interaction, or they're afraid of how to adjust themselves, or they're afraid of how to do it, being ignorant and failing at how to do it. And so these are, again, this is a problem of education. You need to be physically fit, you need to be emotionally fit, which is stoicism. Character building, right? That's really what you're trying to do with mindfulness, is produce character, right? Good character. Unfortunately, our ancestors got it wrong. They were thinking about character, but they weren't thinking about the mindfulness necessary to produce the character, which is what the Stoics did, right? Stoicism is just Greek thought, right? I mean, it's just constitution. And then the problem is you've got to produce understanding, which is the economics that you're talking about, which is the unconsidered, in my view, is law, right? And then you got it. So if you have law and morality and economics and accounting and project management, you sort of you have a means. If you have economics and law and you have a basic loose study of the the triangles,
Yes.
right? If you know the triangles, right, because we've sort of fixed that problem hardcore, right? If you know basic law, basic economics, the triangles and the grammars, you don't even have to know the grammars other than that they exist. Right.
The grammars are like just the dimensionality of the grammars is sufficient.
That's all you need to. Okay, I get it.
And to be able to recognize what type of grammar you're being confronted with.
Right. That's it. That's all. The whole point is just to understand that there's a thing there, and you can say, okay, they're using this. Is this applicable to that? Right. It just, and that's not hard.
Is it appropriate for this discussion? Right.
This discussion. And then now after you've got understanding. Once you have understanding, now you need competency.
Now you can work on that.
Now you can work on competency because you have understanding. But you've built a foundation from the body to the intuit to the emotions,
yeah.
To the mind. To the skills, right? I mean, you've built this pyramid of 4 steps for people, and they have the full resources to do it. But it's like, let's throw people into the meat grinder of a capitalist economy, totally fucking unprepared for the alienation, chaos, learning on your, I mean, it's fucking criminal. And who did it? Girls, women. And the men who sell stupid shit to women because they can get attention and money for it. because credentialism eventually loses the point of whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish, and instead becomes about teaching and making money from teaching whatever it is it's easiest to teach, which is whatever people are asking for, instead of achieving the social political objective that the teaching was invented in order to achieve. I mean, it's like manufacturing a product.
So it is like it's the institutionalization of the universities.
They got in the universities, they produced a bunch of propaganda, right? They found a way to fund that propaganda through research grants, right? And selling courses. So they created a funding system for it, which put debt out on people, particularly women, who now don't marry early and have kids, right? And are now indebted, right? So they're now not, what you've done is you've decreased the population. You've created women who have lost their opportunity for mindfulness and lost their opportunity for adaptation to a mate, right? And so now you've destroyed the family too, right? Then you go out and take those women, you put them in education system, and they teach children to be as infantilized as they are.
That made me sad.
Because what are you trying to do in a classroom? You're trying to exert control over people through the capture of their attention.
Yes.
Well, women are good at capturing attention, but are they good at forcing adaptation? No.
Right.
They're pandering to the kids. And they're made a profession out of it.
This is the cycle that you described with the generated propaganda and a funding system, and then they believed their propaganda, and then they just kept on talking about it as if it were meaningful.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that it's the masculine women that are doing this.
Oh,
right. In other words,
I would say they're being led by the feminine
and so
cognitive male systematizers.
Right. Well, I mean, that and the women they've brought into university. I lost you. There you are. It's really depressing how successful the march through the institutions was. The Frankfurt School came here. They laid out a plan. They know, excuse me, Gramsci came up with the idea, right? The Frankfurt School adopted it. They came here and they intentionally destroyed our education system, what they called the march of the institutions.
They had assistants, and the assistants came from the famous institutions. The Rockefeller Institution is one of them. The Ford Foundation is one of them. So the great foundations were assisting in this process. And I would say the intelligence agencies were also participating to some degree.
I don't know.
Well, it's like a lot of.
I don't. I just look for the incentives, despite any. Yeah, it's that's all there. I'm gonna argue if it's there, that's great, but it didn't need to be, because the product they were selling was a desirable product to a generation was the first generation off the farm that was able to go to college. Right. And so they shipped a product that we had a ready market.
Yes.
Right. And it was ready to go. It was the first generation off the farm. And they kept working this critique, whether it was the Vietnam War or capturing the news businesses or the civil rights movement or immigration. That whole process that was put into place in the 50s and industrialized in the 60s created the problem. And it went into the early 70s. And go ahead.
Go ahead.
And so the argument that Rothbard blames it on the Christians, and of course I'm going to blame it on the Jews because that's the opposite. But the problem is the Christians are vulnerable to it, because if you look at the Protestant Northeast women, who are the fucking curse of humanity. Excuse me, did that come out of my mouth? Did I actually say that?
I don't know.
Do-gooding New England bit airheads. Anyway, so these they do getting New England and evangelicals turn from church morality to political activism. And they produce this whole feminist movement and all this other nonsense. So when they're told these stories, you've got a coincidence of the men who are advocating on behalf of these women, the women that are in leadership that are advocating it, and this new group of fresh meat. In Ukraine, we call them fresh off the farm. They're the ones you want.
Yeah.
Fresh off the farm, nice girls, right? So they've got this new crop of fresh off the farm, ready to be the first ones in their generation to go to school. Right. And they get enough guys who are from the previous classes unable to go to school, right? And enough girls who are from previous lower classes able to go to school. And they've had their little pink houses during the 50s and the early 60s, and they get put into the education system as an industrial process, and they come out as Marxists. And we see the cultural revolution of the 1960s, which they were trying to repeat what they'd done in Russia and China, they were trying to do here. And so
it's interesting that 68, the Weather Underground they were trying to finalize the revolution.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the bombings. Do you?
I remember vaguely
I think you're a little bit. I keep forgetting. You're younger than I am.
A little bit.
A little bit.
I don't remember the Weather Underground. I remember them capturing the last one in the late 70s, and it's like, wow, it's just.
I remember when there were bombings every week. The leftist was bombing everything. That's why I'm like, they're like, oh, there was this terrible attack at economy. I mean, I remember when the left bombed the fucking Congress. I remember the bomb going off at Congress, right? I remember, I'm like, I remember bombs going off all the time, right? Around, Italy was out of hand, but here in the States, it was happening all the time. I remember the marches and the fires and the fact that the civil rights movement achieved its goals by in 3 weeks of holding Washington hostage. Why? Because the good Christians and good white people didn't want to be known as oppressors. So anyway, you're right in saying there was a really great intersection of forces that made possible the use, who provided a ready customer base for seditious ideas, the pseudoscience, seditious pseudoscience, scientific ideas.
It goes back to Bernays, I believe George Bernays, Edward Bernays. He was the founder of public relations back in the 20s. Wrote the book called Propaganda, and it's like he described the circumstance by which we pander to the subconscious to influence social conditions.
Yep.
And he was this is for the audience. He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And say no more. So they sold the libertinism, and it was before women had the right to vote. Even they were selling cigarettes to women and breaking social norms for the purpose of making money.
Well, what is their group evolutionary strategy? Don't get pissed at me for saying the truth. Profiting from sedition. Huh. They profit from undermining, from destruction of the commons, and until the public won't tolerate it. Hence the 109 number. So don't get mad at me for telling you the truth. That if we fix the law, it won't happen anymore. So we don't have to blame people. We have to blame ourselves, right? But for not.
Well, that's not correct. We don't blame. We just take responsibility.
Correct. We just take responsibility.
That's all.
We take responsibility for fixing it. It kind of bothers me a little bit that Peterson, I'm just being a smart ass, that Peterson was so right about the responsibility argument. He just can't complete. And it's like all these guys. It's like they get a little wedge into something, but they don't see the whole picture.
I think that they aren't willing to articulate what they see.
They what?
I believe they are simply unwilling to functionally articulate what it is they actually see.
Yes, that's probably true.
Because Peterson, I saw him in lectures speaking about this intelligence problem and trying to deal with the fact of the burgeoning underclass. So he sees it and understands it, and he says nobody has an answer for this. These problems, and it's like there's some missing the point. He doesn't see something, and there's some I'm not willing to talk about some things. Because I saw him get asked a question. He's like, he's on a public stage, and he refused to answer the question. He says, "I can't do this."
Yeah, I remember that. I actually remember that video.
Like, oh, it's a tough one. It's like he thought about it, and he's trying to figure out how to formulate. He's like, I can't do it.
That's actually something I respect about him that I need to learn myself, is that I was more like that before 2008.
Yeah.
And if you look at my TV interviews in the early 2000s,
Okay.
I'm doing the same thing he is. And after my 2008, 10, 12 cancer and illness, I stopped being so defensive. In other words, I was part of my saying fuck it was I started demonstrating, well, fuck it, I'm just going to say it. And I'm trying to think of, I just really like myself, and I like life by just being more what I consider honest. But I really admire him for his discipline in choosing his words. And I would, if I get healthy enough that that I can afford to spend some time on self-modification, I might try to get that back a little bit. If you actually listen to my internet interviews that are all voice, they're not videos, in their early teens, I was again more cautious. But it's at some point, I'm like, it's just too hard to navigate the falsehoods. And it's in other words, this is why your work has been with me has been so helpful, is that how do I get away from anger and blame and get into just, look, it is what it is. That's the way it is. It's not anybody's fault. Evolution did this. We're here, right? Accidents. It's accidents, and it's our job to, thank you, be responsible for fixing it. Why? Because we're the only ones who can, right? I mean, we're the only people who know how to fix it. We have the only institutions that can fix it. So it's our responsibility to fix it. But it's like Brandon is great because, of course, Brandon trains fancy police dogs, right? And so he's like, well, the problem is you got to understand we're just the same as the dogs, right? I mean, the dog's it's not the dog's fault, right? It's your fault because you're the one who knows,
man.
What?
Why we blame the dogs?
Well, I mean, it's like, why blame the women, or why blame the children, or why blame the East Asians, or why blame anybody?
The issue is that
you're from Kentucky, aren't you?
No, sir, Virginia, Western
Virginia. Well, I mean, it's like blaming Southern people. Oh, come on. I worked up to that one.
I didn't even, I don't care.
You don't fucking care.
I don't care, man.
God damn it. I got one yesterday. I felt good.
You did.
I got one yesterday.
Yeah, you did. But it's like this. So it's like the issue is just fix the loopholes that are being used against you, so that they can't use them against you. right? That's all. It's like,
Train the dogs.
it's
Well,
all-
train the dogs, train the other men, train the women, train the children, train the people from other cultures that can't fucking get on board because they don't
You
understand it.
don't need to, it's okay. You just have to create the incentive structures to make it so that everybody understands what's really going on by other
Okay,
means.
so now you got it. Now we've got an opportunity to talk about something interesting.
Oh,
So we started out this conversation with the value of falsification,
yes,
right? And one of the things I always try to say is, if you implement laws that are understandable, they will work their way through the system.
yes.
In other words, if they just do, that's all of history,
Yes,
right? That there are laws that fail because they can't be done, they can't be enforced, right? They can't, because people can't predict them, or it's not possible. But in general, if you make a good law, which usually suppresses an irreciprocity, people will adapt to it. And it's really kind of interesting how a law percolates through a population and an economy, particularly, and in the institutions. And all of a sudden, people develop new norms in order to avoid that particular problem.
it internalizes the law.
Right. And then at some point, relatively quickly, it becomes a habit because it's an institution, and the things move on. So this is, you could have, and think some things work and some things don't. Abortion thing is not going to work. Right? You're going to be on one side or the other of that goddamn thing. And it doesn't look like that's ever going to change. Right? That's just up there with morality, right? It's just,
That's right.
So the thing here is that we have a lot of people who keep trying to tell a new story to get people to buy into.
Yes,
Via positiva, ideology, philosophy, religion, right?
that's right.
Pseudoscience,
Yes.
crystals. Come on, okay, I got one.
It's like this is like just like what say whatever I gotta say to make you do this.
Crystals.
That's it.
So people come up with stupid shit, right? And this is what bothers me, is the right is trying to come up with shit that says, hey, you should believe in this.
Oh,
When we're past the time period where you ask people to believe in anything.
yeah,
You don't have to
really
believe in anything, because we don't need to agree anymore, because our organizations are too broad at too large a scale.
That's
We don't
right.
have to agree on the good. That's what common means in common law. It means we only agree on what's bad.
Oh, I like that.
I get so, that's why I'm so frustrated about the Nazis and the ethnocentrists and the ethno-nationalists and the fundamentalists and the Marxists and whatever. You can't get people to agree on the positive. What you can do is get people to agree on the negative. And in our case, if you disagree with the negative we're talking about, well, you're just a criminal. You need to be
That's right.
ostracized or exorcised.
You merit no attention.
You merit no attention. And so if you want to agree on those goods, that's just a market problem. And the way you solve market problems at scale, right? At scale is polities. You can solve market problems as goods, that's easy. Or preferences, you can do that. But in order to do it as commons, you need a polity.
That's right.
And so if I want to produce let me think of something silly. I want to, okay, here's something I don't want. I like this product Apple used to put out that automatically backs up your hard drive.
Sure.
Right? All right, Apple's model was defective, so they took it off the market and they have replaced it. But it's what I want. And I want that exact same fucking thing, except I want it with a hard drive that doesn't fail. Right? And they're expensive. They're 400. Used ones have gone up in price. Right? I mean, because people still want them. Right? So I have a couple over there. So, and the great thing is, it's invisible to me. My things back up here, I have no idea, right? I'm completely incognito. Right? And so I want to produce that. Well, I can. Right? I can also produce a club. Eli's out there building this fucking movement he's got going on, which is barbecues, I guess, or something like that, meetups, right? Right. The thing is that those things depend on existing infrastructure,
Yes.
right, and rules of cooperation. But if your thing, the thing you want is a commons that needs to depend on rules and infrastructure, you need their own polity. So we need multiple polities, not in the via negativa, which is what Rothbard said, which is why Rothbard was a scumbag. We don't want to have different rule of law. We want to have different positivas, which is norms, traditions, values, and commons.
Right.
So maybe even products and services, you want those things differently. So that's what you need. And that's why small ethnocentric states are happy, because there's not enough diversity to create conflict, and there's not enough difference to inhibit redistribution. So, you get these $10 million population, or
Right.
what's Estonia? It's like 3 million people or 2 million. I mean, it's like 2 million people. It's fucking awesome. And they're all pretty blonde kids. Anyway, so you get these small homogeneous states. There's no reason to complain. The power distance is across the road, right? And so that's our problem in America, is that we need to get away from universal via positivas, which is what the left wants.
Yeah.
And we need to get away from the rightists who want universal positivas and produce a market for polities. Right?
It's Estonia is 1.3 million.
Yeah, it's little, right? I mean,
Sorry. I like
I
that.
have a friend who lives there, and he's quite handsome, and he likes Estonian women.
That's
Which is
good.
really easy.
That's where
He's
they are.
only one of my friends who can go through supermodels. I have friends that go the opposite end. They go like bottom feeders.
Hmm.
I'm not getting anywhere with you.
I'm sorry, brother.
You're like, am I running over your time slot or something?
We're to the pushing the envelope now.
Okay. I was like, he's not responding, so something is going
right.
on.
I'm just in neutral, man. I'm good.
All right.
Appreciated this conversation, however.
Well, what did we cover today? This is pretty important.
Right.
We essentially covered mindfulness today, right?
Yeah, we did.
Mindfulness.
And the interesting function to me was that it appears to be inevitable that where the human beings are moving from a universal justificationary system, or that's what the conflict is between an intention by some to impose a universal justificationary system that is non-correspondent with reality.
Correct. Because really they can't scale, they can't systematize. This is why the problem generates with women in the left, is they can't systematize. They can only empathize. And we keep thinking that they're mean. They just can't do it. And they think we're mean because we don't empathize. No, we can empathize, or at least most of us can, but we can also systematize. So we start thinking about what the externalities and the costs and the consequences.
Which they can't see because they don't understand economics.
It's like being colorblind. They can't get away from it because they're wired that way, and evolution wired them that way for a reason, and that's okay. We try to find a compromise, but we only evolved to live in these bands and tribes, right? We didn't evolve to live in these, 100 million populations.
That's right. So it requires work to be able to scale.
Well, I mean, it's okay, even if, let's say, you're agrarians, right? India is a great example, right? You have a fucking billion people who are mostly agrarians, right? And so what are you going to do? You're not different. We're an advanced economy. We're all different. Moreover, the Scandinavian evident proof, so to speak, is that the more prosperous you are, the more likely you are to pursue your intuitions, right, rather than compromise. So we're generating demand for polities. Well, let's stop fighting demand. Give the market what it wants, right? The problem is you've got to stop the people who want to be monopolists, controllers.
That's the conflict, is the universal imperial justificationary empire is,
of equalitarianism.
that's it.
And they can't, that's because they can't imagine systems of hierarchies, right? They can't, or hierarchies, they can't imagine them. They can only feel equalities and inequalities. It's fucking terrifying. It's like you realize we're just a little better than cockroaches at some point. It's frustrating. Cockroaches are gross. Let's pick some other animal. Rabbits.
Oh, okay. I have lots of rabbits in my neighborhood. Now, Kurt, do you intend to get back to the lying, cheating next week?
Yes, but I have court a week from Wednesday, so
Oh, 1 week.
I have to
You
get,
have-
I
you have
need to get a
another
letter,
week
I need to get a
there.
letter from you and from somebody else, and then I gotta fill out a little bit more paperwork and I'm good.
All right.
All right, I'll send you.
Happy to help. You just tell me what I need to do.
Okay, boss.
And we'll chat later.
Love you, brother. And no, and by the way, I'm really enjoying these past couple of chats we've done freeform. Partly as a break from going through the line.
That's
So
right.
it's
No, it's good. I
it's
don't
good.
mind doing it. It's because we cover some interesting information and discuss the matters that I think are of general value to the public.
love you, brother.
Yes, sir.
Bye.
Bye.